Tika is joining us here on set as well for the international papers. We're going to start with the Panama Papers scandal, the Guardian's coverage on China's involvement.
It's on the front page this morning, Stuart. 8 members of China's, quote, red nobility are among those caught up in the Panama Papers scandal, and some of them with a very checkered past. Among those who have taken advantage of offshore companies, the daughter of Li Peng. Now, Li Peng oversaw the brutal crackdown on protesters at Tiananmen Square back in the late 80s. And also Gu Kailai, the wife of Bo Xilai, an ex-Politburo member who's been jailed for corruption and power abuses. So since the scandal broke, of course, China's censors have been blocking access to any incriminating evidence. But it's worth noting, of course, that China was one of the biggest clients of Mossack Fonseca, who had a lot of offices all across the country.
Yeah, of course, the Panama Papers has been a mammoth effort. I've got to get this right. 2.6 terabytes of information, 5 million emails, hundreds of journalists right across several countries. For some, a real success then for investigative journalism.
That's according to this opinion piece in The Guardian this morning. Simon Jenkins is the author of this article called Hail to the Power of the Press. Now, we know firsthand that journalists are not the most respected, and the profession has been thrown many curveballs, to say the least. But for Jenkins, the Panama Papers shows that while politicians dither, investigative journalists are going out there, getting the information, exposing this information, and forcing politicians to act. And now we've already seen this with the resignation of the Prime Minister of Iceland, and indeed the pressure that's being put on David Cameron over his family's role. For Jenkins, this is a real success for the profession. He says, quote, "The press may die one day, but not just yet."
Well said. Let's move on to Vladimir Putin. He's set up his own National Guard, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's a National Guard of up to 300,000 people, so it's not a small National Guard. Officially, it's to help in the fight against terrorism, organized crime, sort of to reinforce the Russian SWAT team and riot police. But for Mark Galeotti, he's a New York-based professor in Russian politics who writes who's the author of a blog called In Moscow Shadows. The real reason is because Putin is worried about his own power and also the growing sort of public unrest. Now, the National Guard, for Galeotti at least, is Putin's personal army that's designed to suppress rebellious protests, but also keep the elite in check. Now, adding to that, of course, is the fact that Putin's close ally, Viktor Zolotov, who was the head of the Federal Security Guard service in the 90s, is head of this new National Guard. And there's no one more loyal to Putin than Zolotov. So for the Moscow Times, Putin is really showing what he cares most about. That's keeping his own power and suppressing the people.
Story now that's making waves in Italy. This is the death of a young man that's threatening to break diplomatic relations with Egypt.
That's right. It's a big story in Italy. It's an extraordinary story, Stuart. It's the death of Giulio Regeni, a PhD student who disappeared in Cairo back in January on the 5th, the day of the 5th anniversary of the Arab Spring uprising. Now, his body, mutilated, was later found in a ditch outside of Cairo. Human rights organizations say he was targeted because of his research work with trade unions and the opposition. Now, Egyptian police say Regeni was kidnapped and killed by some sort of organized criminal gang, but Italian authorities are disputing this. They're blaming Egypt of being behind his death. And this has actually been reinforced by a series of anonymous emails sent to the Italian newspaper La Repubblica. The emails are from an anonymous source who claims to be from the Egyptian secret police. And says Egyptian authorities, including General al-Sisi, ordered Regeni's death or assassination, and they point to certain details of torture that were not known to the public, but were known to prosecutors, so possibly indicating that this source is quite legitimate.
And there's now quite a diplomatic row, or it's leading to one, isn't it, between Italy and Egypt?
It's a diplomatic row, mainly because Italy accuses Egypt of stonewalling for months now, I guess, since the death in January. And they actually threatened to pull out their ambassador. In any case, the emails have really sort of pushed forward this case, and Italian authorities are holding talks with Egyptian authorities today and tomorrow.
Okay, we're going to stay in Italy for our last article. This is a new career as a murder expert for a man, though, who's been convicted of murder. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. The Sun is reporting this, Stuart. Now, Raffaele Sollecito, you might remember him as the ex-boyfriend of Amanda Knox, Foxy Knoxy.
Yeah.
Both were accused, convicted acquitted, reconvicted, so forth, of murdering their roommate, Meredith Kirscher. Now, Sollecito spent 4 years behind bars, and the Italian press, at least, widely believed that he had indeed taken part in the murders. Now, it appears that his experience as a jailbird is coming in handy for his new career as a murder expert on an Italian TV show called The Mystery of the Week, where he lends his expertise to real-life murder cases.
Interesting. OK, well, that's on the front page of The Sun. We'll see if that creates any kind of row. I suspect it might do. Diptyka, thank you very much. Diptyka with the papers, and Stephen as well before that with today's business news.